for coming onto our very first episode of Nonprofit 2.0. My name's Cherry for everyone that's tuning in, and I am the founder and CEO of Claribase. We are an Airtable consulting company that's here to help all sorts of nonprofits with their data needs. Adam, I would love to get you to introduce yourself as well.
Absolutely. I'm Adam Hertzman. I'm with Adar Tova Consulting. We're an AI consulting company working with mostly small and mid-sized nonprofits on AI training, policy, and implementation.
And what are you seeing in terms of nonprofits adopting AI? What are some common use cases?
Wow, it really runs the gamut. A lot of smaller organizations are really experimenting at this point. We see a lot of things with just day-to-day productivity, and there seems to be an interest in getting more stuff done. But there's a wide range, anywhere from, we're helping sort through emails, all the way to organizations, mostly at the larger end, who are doing really interesting things, taking data that they have or services that they have and either automating them or enhancing them in a way that really goes to the organizational mission. So I'll give you one great example that I love. There's an organization called Everytown for Gun Safety. They have a website, everytownlabs.org, on which they've created an AI system that consolidates public information about gun violence incidents and puts them into a searchable database that tracks trends over time. So it's solving a problem that they had, which is that the available data on gun safety is often 2 to 3 years out of date just because of government collection. So it provides a much more up-to-date method for them to talk to reporters and to talk to the community about their core impact and about the importance of gun safety.
That's awesome. Definitely something very, very much visible in the news these days. Something else that as we approach 2020, we wanted to discuss together is really how nonprofits can use AI and use different systems like Airtable to actually help with their nonprofit funding and just grant application process. So I would love to touch on that a little bit more. What kind of use cases have you seen there?
Absolutely. The use cases to me really fall in 3 overall categories. One is
Mhm.
that day-to-day productivity and efficiency. The second is more complicated automation and analysis. And then the third one is innovation. So on the fundraising side, there's examples in every category. An example on the sort of day-to-day productivity is I've seen a couple of organizations where the fundraisers go out on in-person solicitations. There's usually time in the car or, if you're a university or hospital at an airport, and there's downtime in which you don't necessarily have access to a computer, but you have access
Mhm.
to your phone. Those fundraisers are just recording their solicitation notes as a voice memo and then using AI to transcribe it and to consolidate the transcription into something usable for a CRM or to create action items to send out to other people in the organization or whatever. In the automation and analysis, on the fundraising side, the analysis part has really become powerful. There's a point at which, even just a year ago, it required a lot of technical skill to understand what's going on in your donor data. Now,
Mhm.
a lot of the AI tools, even just the basic paid versions of some of the well-known chatbots, ChatGPT, Gemini, if you're a Google Enterprise organization, Copilot, if you're a Microsoft organization, those tools can do a lot of the analysis that it really took somebody technical to do in the past. And so you can get up-to-date, timely razor analysis that can change the course of what you're doing real time during the year. So instead of getting to the end of the year and saying, oh, we're not doing great with our mid-sized donors, you can actually say, great, in the first quarter of the year, oh, we were behind on mid-sized donors, so we need to put more effort on that in order to make sure that we can actually reach our goals for the year. Even in fundraising, there are some things on the innovation end too. I actually very pleased that I just helped a small nonprofit in Pittsburgh get a grant from OpenAI Foundation. They put out a $50 million grant pool, and this is actually just a cool innovation project. It is going to be for a small music organization that serves students, a rehearsal buddy that enables the conductor to take the notes that he's giving to the students over the course of the rehearsal and then actually consolidate them into something that he can send out. But I mention this from a fundraising perspective for a particular reason, which is even before they put out the innovation itself, the publicity they got around this grant actually surfaced an additional donor, a sizable donor who had not been involved at all with the organization before this. So I really feel like there's opportunities in innovation to highlight the impact of the organization, and through that, in order to get donors, especially large donors, excited about the organization in a way that they may not have been before.
Yeah, I saw that news on OpenAI's $50 million fund as well. That's really cool. I just want to come back to that individual donor piece a little bit and hear more about how you did that and what kind of questions were you asking ChatGPT or whatever LLM they were using. So did you just end up putting all of their spreadsheet data or their database of donors into ChatGPT and just asking it to analyze the information?
Essentially, yes. There's a process for certain. And I think this is where, Clarabase, as an example, your expertise comes in. You can put all that information into a paid version of the chatbot. You obviously don't want to put in personally identifiable information. So organizations that I work with, they're stripping out names and street addresses and phone numbers. If you just have the record ID and still keep the zip code in, you can get some geographic information, and you then can marry that information back with the actual individual donors to find out what's going on. When I say that there's a process, there's lots of things to think about that are just the normal things that we think about when we think about using databases. Understanding what's in the data and how accurate it is. Data hygiene is a big one.
Yeah.
Understanding, are there specific fields that may seem like they're good indicators, but are actually not a great indicator? That last one, I'll give you an example. Worked with an organization where there was an indicator as to whether the donation came through the mail, their website, through text message, or through in-person or phone. But it turned out that a lot of their direct mail, the people were ending up going on to the website once they got the direct mail and putting in a donation on the website. And this organization didn't match that back to the solicitations they'd sent out by mail. So it's not really giving an accurate picture. As a result, you got to fix that kind of information. You got to fix that analysis before you go and ask the AI to figure out what the analysis is, because otherwise you're feeding it wrong information and you're unlikely to get the wrong answer. Some of those processes are absolutely doable using AI as well.
Yeah, and that's where I was really interested in where our work interconnects, because in my world, it's all about data integrity, making sure there's a single source of truth for all of the donor information, all of the grants that they've applied to, any kind of grant reporting that needs to come out of their programming data. So it's really cool to hear you say, well, with AI, you're actually just taking all that huge dump of information and then letting it analyze for you what are the major trends.
I actually feel like in some ways, the ability to do more with your data is just exposing things that probably were problems for some organizations for years or decades, but now that they definitely have to deal with before they move forward. That's data hygiene, it's data governance. There's culture issues too. The four biggest culture barriers that I see that mostly already existed but tend to get exposed because of AI are the psychological safety to experiment. These tools are very new.
Hmm.
People need to have that space.
Yeah.
Following within the organization, the ability to create a continuous learning environment where you're not just experimenting, but telling other people about those experiments. And finally, just being a more data-driven organization. So now that you have the data available and you can query it and actually learn from it, getting to the point where the staff and the leadership especially are comfortable using that data to make decisions.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And in your work, do you see that being a challenge for leadership? Because a lot of people in my world, it might come from sometimes it's top down where they want to adopt new tools, but other times it's very bottom up, like the worker bee at the organization is really excited and young, and they're hungry to explore some different tools. So where does that come from for you when people are adopting new tools?
There's an intersection. Um, Airtable is such a powerful tool that I know a lot of times in organizations, um, the staff wait around for a while and they say, this is ridiculous. I could just do this myself in
Yeah.
Airtable, but that data may not be connected to other parts of the organization. As you said, there's data hygiene or data integrity problems. So some of that's sort of bubbling up from the staff, but it's coming down from leadership too. A funny change that I've seen since July 1, 2025. I feel like sometime in that time period, so many nonprofit organizations had their first board meeting of the year, if they're, on July 1 to June 30th, or the third one of the year, if they're quarterly. And the board turned to the executive director or CEO and said, hey, what are you doing with AI?
Yeah.
So there's been an interest from the top down in the organization as a result of that. But where that's ended up being effective is both where it's aligned with strategy and where the leadership are more careful about having a conversation with their staff, not just saying, hey, we're adopting AI, but
Mhm.
starting with, how do you feel about it? What are some of the concerns? What are your existing experiences with it? What are some of the challenges we're experiencing that weren't solvable before, but now might be solvable with one of these tools, right? And that I'm sure because you probably see this a lot. People adopt Airtable in part because it's a tool that they're able to get stuff done in a way that they weren't previously, and that
Mhm.
just bubbles up from the bottom of the organization. But the the culture of how do you integrate that into the organization? How do you make the space to experiment, but without messing up other
Yeah.
processes and structures in the organization? That's something that needs to be a conversation with leadership too.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny you say when the board members are asking, it's a deer in headlights situation, because I was thinking recently in San Francisco, I was there for business, and I think every bus in San Francisco had the word AI on it. So it's just so prevalent. People almost feel like pressure to adopt it or say that they're adopting it, but it's nice to have experts like you to really help people adopt it the right way. And in terms of, just making sure that organizations aren't adopting AI but then dropping another part of the process, or having conflicting processes happening, how do you map that out in the beginning of the project?
It's less about AI and technology tools and more about sort of traditional business process analysis and business process reengineering. That doesn't have to be a complicated topic for nonprofits. It really just means getting the right people in a room together. And those right people are usually the frontline people who actually do the work every day. So they know what actually goes on. You'll get a supervisor in the room. And they're like, oh, we download information from the CRM and upload it into Airtable. And the worker bee says, wait a minute. We download information from our CRM. Then we go through this whole process where we take out the commas because we can't import those with our current tool into Airtable, and then we rearrange the columns, and then we have to change the column headers.
Yeah.
And once you start understanding those details and those steps, that gives you a sense of like, where are the pain points in this process? Once those are mapped, one of the big elements that AI changes is the question, where is a human necessary in this process?
Hmm.
Then the corollary to that is, how important is the human in the process, which is to say, what's the value of human judgment? So again, simple example. You may previously have had to say in a process, okay, this is a large project or this is a small project. Previously, you absolutely needed a human being in order to say that. Now you kind of don't, right? If you have the right prompt as part of the process, the AI tool can add that as a step in the automation to determine, is this small, large? Maybe you kick out ones that it's not sure about and have a human intervene in that step of the process.
Yeah.
But that process reengineering is really what it's about. And, I see the Airtable automation as being a great way to take pieces of that project out as well and automate them within an existing data environment that doesn't require connecting systems together. Stuff doesn't break as much, but it's very much a human process. I think that, one of the barriers that I see in nonprofit organizations, they're all short-staffed, the budgets are slim, and so it's hard to stop for a minute and say, okay, before I do this next thing, how often do I do it? How long does it take? Is it unnecessary? Are there unnecessary steps in it? Can I take a little bit of time and step back? Even just the time to put it on my list of things we want to automate later, and then come back to it and say, what's missing here? And then what are things that I can do to automate? And the beauty of the AI tools, including the ones that are in Airtable itself, is that a lot of those things that were difficult to do before are now cheap and possible in a way that they weren't.
Yeah. And where does that come in to this grant management process? Because we wanted to give people some concrete ideas and very actionable steps in terms of how they can adopt AI to help their next year's grant management or grant planning cycles or grant application cycles.
Absolutely. On the grant application side, this can mean automatically grabbing pieces that today everybody's always trying to look up. So, you always need your mission, your vision,
Mm,
values. There's information from the 990. There's an intersection here of enabling an AI tool through a prompt to pull that information into your grant application,
yeah.
and just the internal process that says, great, every time the 9090 comes out, we're also going to save it to this particular place in Google Drive or this particular SharePoint file, so that our standard AI prompt that pulls that information into the grant is pulling it for the most recent thing, right? That's a human part of the process that sucks into this. There are AI tools that pull that information in for you. Grantable, there's a couple of AI tools. I haven't used them extensively, but I understand that there's some benefit there. It's not necessary in that you can build your own prompts, your own systems to do it, but it sort of skips a step where the grant application says mission statement. Grantable just automatically pulls your mission statement and pulls it into that information. Or a better one, it says you have 220 words and your strategy is 275 words long. It just automatically shortens it in the way that you need to. You're going to need to look at that and make sure it didn't take out something critical, at least edit it. But it saves a ton of time. On the grant application process from grantors, from funders' perspective, lots of potential benefits here. Some of this is in summarizing the information that's in and summarizing it in a consistent way. I've seen organizations actually build sort of AI rubrics that say, here's the 5 areas that we fund. score the grants that we have that came in on these 5 areas using these criteria, and then explain how you came up with that scoring so that we make, with actual quotes from the grant, so that we make sure that the AI is not just imagining or making stuff up, hallucinating, we call it. But that can be a powerful way to shorten that process. I'm actually just working with a client now who needs to present that information to the board, who is a lot involved in funding decisions. Great way to do that, because they've presented to the board lots of times. So they have actually a written format for the board presentation. Upload 4 or 5 of those to your favorite chatbot. Put in all the information that you need, and then just say, write this in the format of the ones attached. Turns out that AI is very, very good, at least with excellent first drafts, at doing that kind of writing if it has some consistent examples.
Yeah, I love that like grant giving organization example, because they all, well, at least for the ones that we worked with, a lot of them have different goal areas or areas of investment that they want to focus on. So then when they get these applications, they can map out how it aligns with this particular goal area, and maybe there's separate criteria that they're evaluating based on, and actually being able to see at a high level if AI could help rank order all of their applications. I think that could make the review so much better and so much more efficient to be able
And as
to
a matter
do
of fact,
that.
one of the most powerful things that nonprofits that I've worked with who are successful are doing is
Mhm.
using AI kind of as a thought partner. So when I
Mm.
say that, posing questions like, what things might I be missing? Or what's a structured way of thinking about this? Obviously, you're not going to take all of the output of the AI and use it without thinking about it. But it often surfaces ideas that you might not have thought of, but are things that are critical. It happens all the time in my own work. I'll put something into AI and say, fill in or suggest areas that I might be missing. And it spits out a list of 7, and not all of them are applicable, but 3 of them I say, yeah, I totally missed that. And I absolutely should have thought about it. I should have known that that was something I should include. So yeah, I'm going to add that. In the same way, you could do this for particular audiences. You're going to go present this stack of grants that you want approved to the board, and you know that there's a couple people on the board who are going to ask specific questions. Great. Put those questions into AI and get the answers ahead of time, get a jump on it. Or from the applicant's
Yeah.
perspective, right? You put in the grant application and you have a person at the grantor who's your project manager, your case manager who you regularly work with, and they always ask these 3 things that are not on the application. Use that knowledge that you already have, that human knowledge, and then lean on the AI to make your life easier, to prepare yourself for those conversations or those interviews.
Yeah, I love that, because people can essentially use AI to write that first draft, like if they're applying for a grant, and then at the very end do a final check using AI to make sure they haven't missed anything, and maybe missed answering like a one part of the 3-part question or something like that.
Even then, just the brainstorming can be helpful.
Mhm.
When I was working with organizations on these open AI grants, we
Yeah.
started with the AI. We said, here's the context. Here's the goals that the organization's trying to achieve for the year. Here's some stuff about our organization's strategy, and brainstorm a list of 10 potential ideas that we could use an OpenAI grant to do that would move us towards those goals. And, again, 5, 7 of those are going to be terrible ideas,
Hmm.
but 2 or 3 of them, you're going to say, okay, the idea that they put in, that doesn't make any sense. But it
Yeah.
reminds me, this other thing that we had been thinking about before, I think we could totally do that using AI. And so great, here's what we're going to do with this grant. Here's the application that we're going to put in. That can be just a powerful way to help you generate ideas, do some of the foundational thinking that bounce ideas off of somebody, but without having to have a human being there in order to do the bouncing.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. And as you were talking about OpenAI, I actually think I should reach out to them because we've done so many projects with other grant giving agencies. So I might do that after. All right. Well, I also, with this like theoretical conversation about people using AI to get the applications in and to make sure they get funding for their organization, I've seen from our work, if you actually track your grants properly, if you track your programming properly, if you track your grantees properly, then you're able to build more capacity in the actual work that they do. So, what I've prepared for this conversation are a couple of demos. Let me just pull them up of how we can actually track those inside of a tool like Airtable, or if you are using a different database tool, I think that could be useful as well. I'm just going to share my screen, and Adam would love your thoughts on where AI gets in during this whole process. So over here, I've got an Airtable database set up where we've got grants, grant reporting cycles that we're tracking expenses for those grants and team members. So the context behind something like this is, let's say a affordable housing nonprofit gets a lot of different grants to fund their work, then they can actually use a database like this to track all of the grants that they're interested in applying to. You can put in their web page, and over here, I've just got an AI summary field to go research the particular grant on the web page and see if it's actually a good fit for that organization to apply to. And maybe you can adjust a prompt to, um, like you said, Adam, like talk about some different ideas or different angles that could be captured in that application. And then you can track all of the dates, the different statuses, whether it's restricted or unrestricted funding, the amount of the grant you're getting. And then over here, because a lot of the grants need reporting, we can see when the reporting cycles are. So for one of the grants, this is an quarterly reporting, and then for another one, it's an annual reporting cycle. And then in here, in our third table here, we've got all the different expenses. So in terms of restricted funding, maybe it's just for programming expenses, whereas in our unrestricted funding, we can use it towards marketing or salaries as well as programming. And then last but not least, just the different people who are responsible.
I think I totally agree with you that organizations underestimate how much time they spend on low value tasks, right? Just the project management involved in tracking all the grant applications that you
Yes.
have. What are the deadlines? When are we going to get the team together in order to talk about this upcoming grant? There's no reason not to offload that to a better system. Something that I love about Airtable that you touched on very briefly, but I think a lot of people don't know about. The AI summary fields within Airtable, that's a really powerful feature, and it applies in so many different ways. You want your fundraisers, when a donor calls, to be able to instantaneously have a summary of all of the donor's activity, where it used to be, I'd have to scroll through the list of things that was going on. Airtable can just provide to you with that AI summary. Here's everything that's going on with this relationship right now. It's
Yeah.
more or less instantaneous, so that when somebody calls, you look a lot smarter as the fundraiser to say, hey, Joe, I'm so glad that you were able to make it to our event last week. And congratulations on your kid's wedding. Would love to talk to you more. I assume you're calling today probably to work on that foundation endowment that you were talking about. So yeah, would love to talk to you more about that. Right? Even if you have no idea who this person was, you're like me, you're not great at remembering who the people are, or you're new to the organization. It makes you look a lot smarter. On the grant side, you know, unbelievable value, whether you're a granting organization or whether you're applying for grants, in having that brief summary of what's going on, especially, just for calls, like your important foundation director calls, you need to know what's going on within the organization. And you don't necessarily, right, you're not the only one working on it. You don't necessarily know what's going on, but you're expected to know in today's day and age, right? That the minimum standard of the left hand talking to the right has changed dramatically, really, since the rollout of the iPhone. So you kind of need that AI functionality, and it's built right into Airtable to enable you to do that. That's unbelievably powerful, and I think underestimated in terms of its value.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think all of these overviews, we were looking at that back end earlier where as the person managing all the grants or overseeing all the grant applications, that's great to see. But in some cases, maybe your board or your executive director just needs to look at a front end interface view of it. So now we can still see that summary, and you can have so many of these different types of fields, and then be able to see when that grant reporting is happening and what are all the different expenses tied to the grant. And you also touched on that calendar piece of your executive director might be expected to know when everything is happening, and they don't have time to send a quick email internally. But if they had a place to look at where all the deadlines are and when all the reports need to get submitted, whether it's an application deadline or a reporting deadline, I think they can just answer questions and self-serve much more quickly.
It's funny, when I came into the nonprofit space and I'd worked in tech for so long, and I
Hmm.
think just some of the disciplines within the tech industry about project management schedules, release dates, deadlines, they're not held to in the same way in many nonprofits, right? I won't speak to all
Yes.
nonprofits, but many nonprofits, right? That's not a discipline that's taught in, master's degree in nonprofit management programs. If you don't have that from your tech jobs where there's that constant pressure to release the next version, it's not necessarily intuitive. But these tools make it easier to do that. The other thing that you said a second ago just reminded me too, being able to connect this data with outside data
Hmm.
can be powerful too. I'll give you an example. There's a newish tool called Utori, Iutori. It is an AI designed to monitor a specific website to see when a condition changes.
What does that mean? A condition changes, like updates to the website?
Could be literally anything. You're like, you know what? I want to know when um I always fly to Denver. I want to know when ticket prices, airline flight prices on Southwest Airlines to Denver are below $150. It'll send you a quick email. But think about it from the grant management perspective, right? I've got 100 grant organizations that I'd like to monitor. When a new grant comes up, I'd love to know about it. And I'd like to put it automatically in my workflow. Great. You can use Utori, connect it with automation tool like Zapier or Make. It's pretty easy to do an automation. Pull that data automatically into Airtable, and you're going to just log in on a Monday and see, here's a list of 5 new grants that got posted that meet my criteria, right? These could
Yeah.
be granting organizations that, they put out 20 new grants, but I'm only going to get the list that match my narrow list of criteria. And then, those automatically get assigned to people. They automatically go into the workflow. All that useless project management stuff, all that time that we spend in low value activity just gets swept into automatic process. And you can spend the time to say, instead of clicking on each website, do they have new grants? Oh, I got to go through the list of grants. Which ones do I think really match? Instead, great, I have 5 potential grants. I can see 3 out of the 5 are applicable to us. Here, I click, click, click. I'm going to assign them. Here's the tasks that we need in order to accomplish them, and here's the dates that we need, and move on to something that's more impactful.
Yeah, what a cool tool. I will have to check that out.
It is kind of fun. I mean, you can use it for other useless things. You want to know when Taylor Swift posts new merch, you know, go to the Taylor Swift merch site and do that too. I am a proponent of trying to use AI for things that are more meaningful just because of the amount of energy that it uses and all those kinds of things.
Yeah.
But I think it's easy to underestimate how much value there is in order to shortchange some of these things that were so time consuming in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I love that idea of tracking Taylor Swift merch. I think you're going to get lots of fans who are all over that.
I'm not a Swiftie myself. I don't know. I feel like I'm going to have to come up with some other organization. I'm on the nerdier side. Maybe it's Think Geek Catalog or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah. Or when a new 3D printer gets released or something. I'm I've got one more base to share. This is on the other end of the on the opposite end. So if you're the person who's giving out grants, you'll also want to track all of your grantees in a system. So over here, we've got a medical faculty grant management system. This is just another demo. We have a few different portfolios. We have different profs. We have different grant applications that have come in from the principal investigators or the different professors in that research institution. And then we've got the grants that have been awarded and the funding that's actually been dispersed. And what this actually looks like inside of interfaces is that I can see all of my different grant applications. This can be sorted many different ways. I can look at who's under review and then maybe move them towards approved or move them back into, if they need us to submit more information, move them back to under review. And then in terms of the funding disbursement, you can see all of the different grants that have been granted and what were all the different transactions that were actually sent towards that project. And then lastly, you can look at the grant management overview where you can see all of the different portfolios or areas of investment. If this is a family foundation, who will be able to come in here and then see what's the total funding available, how much money has been committed, and what's the amount that's remaining. And you can see that in a nice little progress bar as well. And then also be able to see this from maybe a board level or executive level of how much funding is available altogether, how much has been committed, how much has been dispersed. So just from a grant management perspective, you don't need to have each of the portfolios managing their own spreadsheets and then coming together for a 2-hour meeting every week to give updates because all of your information is actually just right here. And it can make meetings a lot more efficient. It'll help people track things in the same place so that at the end of the year, even as a grant management, a grant giving organizations gives out their final impact report, they can pull the high level information very easily.
And I would add to, one of the advantages of having this kind of reporting available is there are additional things that you can do using your AI chatbots that can either analyze or enhance this data. So I'll give you a simple example. Within Claude AI, which is one of the major chatbots, you can do an analysis and then ask it to create an interactive report. If you already have the data structured in the way that you want it to be structured, getting that data into Claude, attaching the data that you need becomes a lot easier. There's a specific cut that you need for a major donor or a board member, or a condition changes in the market, and you really want to show how much funding you have dedicated to a particular need. If you have that information already available in reports, that reporting becomes even more powerful when you add the ability to put it into AI prompts. So there's a mutually reinforcing, virtuous cycle here. Get the right information into your database, get that information clean, report it in a way that's going to be useful for the organization to see. And then once you get to the point where you need to make course adjustments or you need more information, you have the AI tools available in order to do that. You're not going to spend all your time searching for the right spreadsheet and trying to figure out, well, is this spreadsheet accurate? Is it up to date? That foundational work is important in that AI analysis phase. That's really powerful for organizations to become more data-driven.
Yeah, I love that. And I think to summarize what we're both saying here is you can use AI to come up with that initial record level data or that row that you would input into spreadsheets. But instead of using a spreadsheet, you can use something a little bit more connected, like a database, like Airtable, to actually centralize all of your data so there aren't 15 different spreadsheets flying around. And then once your data is centralized, you can feed it back into AI or get elements of it back into AI. Of course, not with the personal identifiable information, but getting that back into AI to do additional analysis. So this like virtuous cycle that you're talking about of how we can get clean data and then get more out of the clean data.
And fundamentally, to me, one of the most important things here is being able to expand impact, right?
Hmm.
I worked with an organization recently. They actually are themselves foundation funded, but they're a capacity building organization that works with other
Nice.
nonprofits.
Yeah.
In order to work with their clients, they have a whole intake form, information about your organization, what are your key challenges, blah, blah, blah. But some of the information when they started out in their intake form is information they want that person, that potential client to input into their intake form from the 990. When we started to work together, I said, I'm pretty sure we could pull that information in automatically just with the EIN. IRS has that data, right? They're reporting it to the IRS through the 990. Instead of making the client go, pull up the 990, look at the number, either write it down or copy it, paste it back into the form. Let's just use an API, an application protocol interface, pull that information from an existing source and shorten the process from the perspective of the client. It turns out that that's not hard to do. Zapier and Make, which are two of the leading automation tools, which is to say connectors between pieces of software,
Yeah.
they both have an API call step in a process. ProPublica is a nonprofit organization that has all this 990 data. ProPublica has a free API, so it doesn't cost anything. You can't write data to ProPublica, but you just ping the ProPublica database with this EIN. You ask it for the pieces of information you need, pull that in using the API. And then once you pull that into Airtable, it's pretty easy to match it to the organization that you need to match it to. And you can do trend analysis over time, right? And it's going to enable you to do a lot of things that would both be burdensome on the client and cumbersome for you as the organization to do. Unbelievable value, both from the amount of time that it saves, but, some of it is just reputational for the the nonprofit client who goes in, you put in the EIN, and then this organization comes back to them and says, hey, we pulled this data from your 990, just verify that it's correct. Here's your total revenue, here's your grant revenue, here's blah, blah, blah. I feel like, that just feels more modern from the client's perspective. The client's going to go, oh, that was kind of cool. I didn't have to enter that because they just pulled it themselves. Whether I think they went and did work on my behalf or whether I just, as a client, think that they're automated and advanced, it's still, there's reputational value there.
Yeah, there's absolutely this pleasant surprise that you can give to the clients when you can just get their information and present it in front of them and just ask them to verify rather than having them copy and paste 20 different fields. I know we've talked a lot about the database element and the AI aspect of it, but the automations and integrations and connecting different systems with one another is such a huge value add that people often miss when they're thinking about systems. So I'm glad really glad we talked about that. Adam, so in terms of where people can find you, where should they go to find you?
I'm at adartova.com, adartova.com, or you could just email me, adam@adartova.com. I'm working with a number of national organizations, so keep your eye out if you are looking for some basic AI training. There's more and more network organizations like YMCA or Jewish Federations of North America who are offering sort of AI 101 training to their organizations. And I've been working with a number of organizations to do that kind of thing. As you know, I've been working with you on a project, and so I'm happy to work with other consultants that people are already working with. I'm a huge proponent of getting an expert in the specific vertical or the specific area that you're looking at. So if you want to use Airtable, you can just call on an AI expert, but you kind of want an Airtable expert in order to structure the database in the right way in the first place, answer questions. And I would also say, again, a little AI benefit here. You can take screenshots. You got to be a little careful to do it within, behind the firewall. Don't do it with a free version of a chatbot. But if you have an error or something is going wrong with one of these databases, take a screenshot, put it into your organization's chatbot and say, I'm getting this error. Can you diagnose the problem? Tell me how to fix it. If the database is structured right, if you're working with a smart consultant, there's also stuff you could fix on your own using AI. So I think there's a benefit there.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And from our end, this Nonprofit 2.0 podcast is brought to you by Claribase, and you can find us at claribase.com. We also have a free resource. It's a data health check. So if you ever want to look at how you can be more efficient, how much time or hours or budget you could save by improving your systems, you can fill out our data health check link down below, and then we'll give you a 90-day plan to help you address some of the data issues on your own, or if you want to engage with a professional. And that's it for our very first episode of our podcast, Nonprofit 2.0. We want to help change makers level up their own skill sets and be able to modernize their own nonprofit organizations.
Thank you so much for having me today. It's been great. A lot of fun.
Thanks so much, Adam. Great to see you.
You too.